On About Books, we delve into the latest news about the publishing industry with interesting insider interviews with publishing industry experts. We'll also give you updates on current nonfiction authors and books, the latest book reviews, and we'll talk about the current nonfiction books featured on C-SPAN's Book TV. And welcome to About Books. Now, in a few minutes, we'll learn about self-publishing with the head of the country's largest association of independent publishers. But first, here's some news from the publishing world. Well, Missouri Republican Senator Josh Hawley is set to join the ranks as being one of the most prolific writers in the U.S. Senate. According to Business Insider, Senator Hawley is in the process of writing his fourth book. This one is entitled The Awakening, The Religious Revivals That Made America and Why We Need Another. He is currently running for a second term in the Senate this fall. The Missouri Republicans' other three books have focused on Theodore Roosevelt, big tech, and manhood and masculinity. Just 9 sitting U.S. senators have written 4 books or more. The sitting senator with the most books to her name is Massachusetts Democrat Elizabeth Warren. She has 14. Vermont Independent Bernie Sanders is next with 7 titles. And another upcoming book to note, former German Chancellor Angela Merkel will release her memoirs later this year. According to her publisher, the memoir will explore Ms. Merkel's childhood in East Germany, the fall of the Berlin Wall, her rise to political power, and her 16 years as Chancellor of Germany. The book is entitled Freedom. It's set to be released November 22nd. And now a conversation about the world of independent publishers and self-publishing. And now joining us is Andrea Fleck-Nisbet, who is CEO of a group called the Independent Book Publishers Association, which is what, Ms. Fleck-Nisbet?
Good morning, and thank you for having me on. So the Independent Book Publishers Association is a nonprofit association of about 3,500 independent publishers located primarily in the United States, but we do have some global members as well. And our members are really a diverse group. So they range in size, background, publishing program. We serve everyone from author publishers who may just be starting out publishing their own book, all the way through large established independent publishers.
So what is an independent publisher?
You know, that is such a great question, Peter, and everyone defines it a little bit differently. And actually, we do have a document, if anyone's ever interested in reviewing the detail of it. On the IBPA website, we have a document that goes into the detail of how we define different types of publishers. So an independent publisher versus, for example, a corporate publisher. And in the United States, there are 5 major corporate trade publishers. And so it's anyone who is not a corporate publisher or a university press, which would be attached to a university or a higher educational institution.
So would this include self-publishing?
That's a really great question as well. Some folks do define it that way. We don't. So at IBPA, about a third of our members are author publishers, and those are individuals who are working with other people to create their own book and put it out into the marketplace. They are not publishing other works. So an independent publisher is someone who is actively acquiring content from an author or developing a book themselves and then hiring an author to write that content. Then they put the package together and distribute it out into the marketplace. So that's really the differentiation. Is an author publisher is someone who's producing their own work along with experts who are helping them. And an independent publisher is someone who is acquiring the work of an author.
So Andrea Fleck-Nisbet, if you and I decided to create a so-called independent publishing company, what would be the steps we would take?
So the first step, I always tell everyone when they're starting out to creating an independent publisher, just like any small business, is to create a mission statement. So why are you creating this organization? Who are you hoping to reach? What type of content are you looking to put out in the world? and then to create a really strong and detailed financial statement. So you want to put together that P&L at the beginning of the process so you really understand what kind of funds and resources you're going to need up front. And then how are you planning to get those books to the market, and what is the cost going to be associated with that? And there are a lot of different moving parts that are part of a P&L for a book publisher. You have to look at acquiring the content, producing the content, distributing the content. So it's really important for folks as they're looking to put a business together to have that business plan in place, to know who they're trying to reach, and to have their finances really shored up as they're looking to launch something.
So if somebody writes a book, how do they get it into the marketplace? Is it automatically available on Amazon, et cetera?
No, it's not automatically available on Amazon. And there are many different ways that you can actually get your book into the marketplace. So, again, the first thing you need to determine is who is your reader? Where are they shopping? Where are they congregating, either online and in person? And then you can start to put together the plan of how you're going to get your book in front of them and where they're actually going to purchase that book. Typically, if it's an author publisher, they are going to put their book together and then either they can post it directly to Amazon once they have purchased what's called an ISBN, which is an identifier number that we in the publishing industry use to identify a unique book. So they can upload the book directly to Amazon through a program called Kindle Direct Publishing, or, and this is typically what we recommend, they can use a platform like Ingram Spark or Lulu Press, or a platform that will allow them to post that book with the files and all of the metadata that surrounds that file. And then the file gets transmitted to Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all of the the online trading partners that would allow the book to be visible. Then once it's online and a consumer can purchase it, the consumer purchased that book, and then on the back end, the book actually gets produced. So in that particular model, the book is not getting printed until a consumer purchases it. And that's something that we call print on demand.
And the technology and the software out there for publishing a book has advanced quite a bit in the last 10 years, hasn't it?
Absolutely. So we always say at IBPA that it's never been easier to create a book and put the book into the marketplace, and it's never been harder to sell a book because, to your point about the technology suddenly making it much easier and more accessible for any individual to create a book, to create their own work and put it out into the marketplace, we've seen a proliferation of books come onto the market. So the number of self-published or author-published books that are now available in the marketplace have gone up around 500% in the past decade. So that's a huge number of titles that are suddenly out into the market.
Now, how many self-published or independent books are written and published every year?
You know, that's a really hard statistic to get a beat on because there's an organization that called Bowker that where folks go to purchase their ISBNs. And so the only real way that we can track that information is by the number of ISBNs that are out into the market. But not all those ISBNs necessarily get used. And something to know about the publishing industry is that we don't actually have a lot of good data around how many books are sold every single year because we don't have one clear system for tracking every single transaction. So I actually couldn't give you a number of how many author published books are produced because we don't have a lot of accurate data out there to tell us exactly how many are in the market.
Can you go back to the ISBN, the International Standard Business or Book Number, and its
Yes.
importance?
So an ISBN is critical to a book being able to be discovered and purchased out in the world. Without an ISBN, unless you're selling a book directly through your own website or you're hand selling a book at events, for example, you can't actually sell a book through Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any trade retail space without an ISBN. And one thing we always remind our author publishers and our new publishers starting out is that it's really critical for the author publisher to own their own ISBN. So when you set up a book through Kindle Direct Publishing, for example, there is an option to get a free ISBN through them, but you never want to do that because the ISBN then doesn't belong to you and you can't take that ISBN anywhere else. So as an author publisher, we always recommend that you go directly through Bowker. And we actually have a discount through our membership where our author publishers can get a discount off of purchasing that ISBN. But it's really critical that if you want to put your book up for sale in any retail space, you have to purchase an ISBN.
Now, Andrea Fleck-Nisbet, before forming the Independent Book Publishers Association, you have a background in corporate publishing, correct?
Yes, that is correct. And actually, I will say I did not form the Independent Book Publishers Association. So I've been here for about 2 years, but the organization was actually founded by a woman named Jan Nathan in 1983. So we have been around for a long time. We just celebrated our 40th anniversary last year, and the organization has grown quite significantly in those 4 decades. I myself have been working in the publishing industry for a little over 20 years. So I spent the first 15 years at one of the largest independent publishers at the time in the United States, Workman Publishing. And then from there, I worked at Ingram Content Group, which is a wholesaler, distributor, and technology company that is really critical to our industry. And then I was at HarperCollins, which is one of those big corporate publishers, where I ran a startup imprint for 3 years called Harper Horizon. And then after that, I decided I really wanted to be working with independent publishers. This is where there's a lot of growth in our industry. So it's been a really fun and educational time working here at IBPA.
Well, what were some of the frustrations that Jan Mason had 40 years ago when she founded the organization, and some of the frustrations maybe you had in corporate publishing?
Sure, that's a really good question. Certainly, the industry has become quite a bit more complex in the past 40 years. So, our members face unique challenges now that they didn't have to face then. But one of the through lines from over the past 4 decades is that independent publishers simply do not have the same resources that corporate publishers do. So typically a corporate publisher is either publicly traded by, HarperCollins, for example, is owned by News Corp, or there's a set of investors that are investing in that corporate publisher. With an independent publisher, you have to think of it as a small business. Oftentimes it's a family business. And so having the resources to be able to compete with corporate publishers can be really challenging for those indie publishers, and also just being able to access the market. And that's actually become even more complex. So when Jan Nathan founded IBPA in 1983, the goal it was really around marketing and trade marketing and pooling the resources of indie publishers into one organization and one entity, and to leverage the shared value and the shared strength of those independent publishers together. We still do that today. We offer a lot of trade marketing programs, but it's actually become even more challenging for books to be discovered and to convert them to sale than it was 40 years ago, simply because there are so many books on the market.
So, does the Independent Book Publishers Association offer marketing and editing help for first-time authors or independent authors?
So we always like to say we are an association that supports the business of publishing, not the craft of publishing. And so what we mean by that is if an individual is looking for help around editing, the production process, we do some of that work, but really our focus is on once the book is created and the author publisher or the independent publisher is looking to get that book into the market, we provide services and education on how to do that. So it's really about the business of book publishing. In terms of what we provide as an organization, it's certainly trade marketing programs, discounts on services that folks who service our industry provide. but it's also about education and advocacy. And those are two really mission critical things that we do at IBPA. So by education, what I mean is teaching author publishers or teaching more established publishers the best way to get their books in front of people, the most profitable way to run their business, and sort of how to protect themselves and their businesses against either bad actors in the industry or against services that may not actually be profitable for them. So that's the educational piece. And then in terms of advocacy, we actually have an advocacy committee that works with other associations like the American Association of Publishers to work on things like uh, book banning or ebook legislation, which may hinder a publisher's copyright rights. So not only are we providing those marketing services, but we're also providing education and advocacy as well.
Can you give us a couple of examples of some of your members, maybe some of the success stories that IBPA has had?
Yeah, so one of the things that we like to say is that in the if IBPA is doing our job correctly as an association, then members are going to grow up alongside of us, which means that they may come into the organization and have limited knowledge about how the industry works. And in using our tools and our systems and educating themselves, and as an organization, when we advocate for them, they should be able to grow their business over time. And one great example of that, we also have an awards program, which was just rebranded it was called the Ben Franklin Awards, and we just rebranded it to the IBPA Book Awards. And that's a big part of what we do as well. We have one publishing member, they're called CamCat Books, and CamCat was started in 2019 by one woman who had a passion for reading and wanted to get books out into the world. And in a very short period of time, Sue has managed to grow her business into a very successful and profitable independent publishing business. So she went from being, very small and just starting out and not having a lot of information. She didn't have a background in publishing to our most award-winning publisher as part of our awards program. So that's just one example of how when a member enters our ecosystem and they take advantage of the services and education, they can grow their business over time.
Andrea Fleck-Nisbet, at the beginning of this interview, you said that you don't use the term self-publish. Why not?
We don't use that term because no one can publish a book on their own, right? So an author can write a book and they can put it out into the market, but we like to say to our author publishers, if no one would pay you to do this activity, you shouldn't do it yourself, by which we mean if no one's going to pay you to design a book cover, then you need to find an expert in the market to design that cover for you because you want to create the most professionally polished book that you possibly can. You spent all this time writing it and working on it and you want to get it out into the world. And to do that, you really need to surround yourself with a team of experts. And that's something else that we do at IBPA is to help guide people through the different types of experts that they're going to need in order to professionally publish a book. We also have a checklist online for publishers who are just starting out, who may not know all of the different steps and all the different details of what a professionally published book is. So we have an industry standards checklist that people can go through to make sure that their book includes all of the different elements needed in order to make that book professionally published.
We often in publishing overlook the importance of distribution, don't we?
We do. And it's a confusing term. Distribution can mean different things to different folks depending on how you're using it in context.
Could you explain that a little bit more?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So the act of distribute, I think of it like little d versus big D distribution. So to distribute a book means to put it out into the market in a way that is discoverable to the end user. And one of the things we also like to say at IBPA is that a publisher should make sure that their book is available in every format, in every market that a reader may want to access that title. So we do talk a lot about accessibility at our association as well. And so that level of distribution can mean posting the book on Amazon, selling the book through your own website, posting the book on a platform like Ingram Spark, which will then distribute your book into the market. But that's really passive distribution. That's just about availability in the market. That's not about driving sales or driving Barnes and Noble or another retailer to actually discover your book and pick it up and say, yes, I want to put this on my bookshelf. So big D distribution is when an independent publisher is picked up by either a distributor or a large corporate publisher that does distribution. So Simon and Schuster, Penguin Random House, Macmillan, Hachette, all of those corporate publishers distribute other small publishers. And when they do that, not only do they bring the data for that book into their systems, they bring the books into their warehouses, and they have a sales team that is actively selling those titles. So that's the difference between small D passive distribution and big D full sales or active distribution.
What's your take on the impact of AI on publishing?
Right. So this is a very hot topic. I just came from the US Book Show, which was yesterday, and it was the first thing that we discussed at the book show. And I've actually talked on it a couple of times at conferences in the past few months. There's a lot of fear, as there always is, when technology evolves. And essentially, that's what this is. This is an evolution of technology. Now, it's a rapidly evolving technology. So there are two different pieces of AI. One is generative AI, and that's when LLMs or large language models are being taught essentially to output based on material. And the concern for publishers from a copyright perspective is that their copyrighted material, their book, the content of their books are being put into these LLMs to train them. And then the output is potentially a book that is competitive with the original title. So the concern is from a copyright perspective, but then also from a competition perspective. And there is real concern there. That is a valid concern. It's something that at IBPA, again, from a legislative perspective, we work with organizations like the Authors Guild and AAP to learn how we can help to protect our members' rights and how we can help our members educate themselves. On the flip side of that are the tools and resources that new AI technologies allow that can actually help our members with efficiencies in their businesses and economies of scale. So when we started this conversation, we were talking about how challenging it is for independent publishers to compete with corporate publishers. Well, new AI technologies, whether it's in marketing or helping to write copy, can actually aid independent publishers to be able to run their businesses more effectively. And so that's where we think AI can potentially benefit our members. But the most important thing for IBPA is that we continue to educate our members, both on the concerns around artificial intelligence, but also on the benefits.
Andrea Fleck-Nisbet is the Chief Executive Officer of the Independent Book Publishers Association. We appreciate you spending a few minutes with us here on Book TV.
Thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
And you're watching About Books, a program and podcast produced by C-SPAN's Book TV. Well, it's on Tuesdays that new books are usually published. Here's a few coming up. June 6th marks the 80th anniversary of the 1944 Allied landings in Normandy, France. And to mark the occasion, author Garrett Graff is releasing When the Sea Came Alive, an oral history of D-Day. Mr. Graff has previously written an oral history of the 9/11 attacks, and his most recent book is Watergate, A New History, that was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in History. Also this week, Baruch College professor Corey Mead publishes The Hidden History of the White House, Power Struggles, Scandals, and Defining Moments. The book was written in collaboration with the American History Tellers podcast and includes a foreword by New York Times bestselling author Kate Anderson Brower, who wrote The Residence, Inside the Private World of the White House. And one other book to note. Former Philadelphia Magazine editor-in-chief Tom McGrath is releasing Triumph of the Yuppies, America, the 80s, and the Creation of an Unequal Nation. Tom McGrath's previous book was about the cultural significance of music television. It was entitled MTV, The Making of a Revolution. Well, this week on Book TV's Afterwards program, health reporter Shefali Luthra looks at the impact of the 2022 Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. She was interviewed by Julie Rovner, a longtime health reporter who is currently with the Kaiser Family Foundation. Here's a look.
Abortion has been so hard to come by for a long time, and part of that is what it means to get health care in this country in general. Abortions are expensive. They are an inherently unplanned expense, and even before the Dobbs decision, most insurance plans, especially Medicaid, did not cover abortion, which means you have to pay for something you definitionally did not expect to, and it will at a minimum be hundreds of dollars, but it can be thousands. If you're later in pregnancy, it can be tens of thousands of dollars. And where we are now is the stakes are even higher. If you are traveling out of state for care, you need to find potentially childcare. You need time off from work. You need someone potentially to come with you if you are having a later abortion and it is more advanced. You might need to rent a car, find plane tickets, find a hotel, figure out how to get around in a place you've never been to before. These are incredible barriers even for people with great means, and what it speaks to is just abortion has never been easy to come by, but now even with a right that is protected in some states, it will become more difficult and has become more difficult for all of us.
And a reminder that Afterwards airs every Sunday night at 10 p.m. on C-SPAN's Book TV. Well, thanks for joining us for About Books, a program and podcast produced by C-SPAN's Book TV. Book TV will continue to bring you publishing news and author programs, and a reminder that you can get this podcast and all C-SPAN podcasts on our C-SPAN Now app. You can also watch online anytime all of Book TV's programs at booktv.org.